I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 13th, 2025. And indeed, there are a lot of things happening right now. In our theology roundup, we're going to be discussing what do we as Messianic believers, Messianic people, what do we do with Roman Catholics? Because after all, one of the big world-changing news events of the past week is that we have a new pope, Leo the 14th. And so necessarily that raises a lot of questions about Catholicism, religious history, etc. Likewise, there's a lot happening right now in the news. President Trump is in Saudi Arabia right now, and he is expected to certainly make some agreements with the Arab world on business. A lot of speculation regarding what he's going to say or not say about the Israel-Hamas conflict, a Palestinian state, etc. There are a lot of people getting rather nervous about President Trump and his relations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And of course, we've got the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, the conflict between India and Pakistan, which is seemingly over right now, and just a lot of things that people are wondering about and they are concerned about. So we definitely have things we need to be praying for, but let's not be under any illusions. Today's Messianic movement has frequently labeled itself as the end-time move of God. And so when we see potential end-time pieces being put in place, we don't need to get cold feet or afraid. We need to say, now it's time for us to shine. Now it's time for us to step up to the plate. And yet, more frequently than not, when we see things involving the end times, people get afraid. I'm not going to be able to do this in my life. I'm not going to be able to do that in my life. And what happens is we begin to manifest many of the complaints of the Exodus generation. All right, so let's get into our theology roundup. Over the past several weeks, we've witnessed the death of Pope Francis, the election of Pope Leo the 14th, and whenever you see what the Pope is doing, what the Pope is not doing, many people who are premillennialists associate the figure of the Pope with the false prophet of the book of Revelation. And so, yeah, there are a lot of people who are looking at this new Pope and they're wondering, is he going to be the false prophet? And other people have invoked that St. Malachi prophecy. I want to tell you right now, there is no requirement that a Pope of the Roman Catholic Church be the false prophet of the book of Revelation. It could be, but there's no requirement. But we know that the figure of the Pope has remained relatively consistent for over a millennia and a half, for certain. And you still have a Pope in Rome, whereas many of the European royal families have disappeared. So it affects us politically, it affects us religiously in some form or fashion, and it certainly is going to affect us socially because there are 1.5 billion Roman Catholics on earth today. And as we're going to discuss, there are a lot of people in today's Messianic movement. Their lives have intersected with Catholicism at some point, whether they've got Roman Catholic neighbors across the street, whether they have got Roman Catholics in their extended families, or whether they were Roman Catholic themselves, or whether they were persecuted by Roman Catholics or discriminated against by them. So this is a worthwhile topic as we see the changes which have just taken place. Okay, now, as with every episode of Messianic Insider, all of the links I'm referring to will be available when this episode is archived on MessianicApologetics.net. So the things I refer to, you can go look them up yourself later today. Okay, so we're going to start out. I'm just going to reference you to the 3 church history books I had to use at Asbury Theological Seminary for both Church History 1 and then later Church History 2. Church History 1 basically dealt with the 2nd century up to the beginnings of the Protestant Reformation. Church History 2 dealt with the Protestant Reformation up to the present, which at the time was the year 2006. So that was right on the tail of the election of Benedict XVI and some of his influences, if we're going to put it in context of the papacy. Okay, so this was the first major book. I had to use Church History 1. I took it in the summer of 2005. The Story of Christianity, Volume 1 by Justo L. Gonzalez. Along with that, with Church History 2, we used his continuing volume, Story of Christianity, Volume 2, The Reformation to the Present Day. This gave some rather fair handling regarding the both negative as well as positive effects on Catholicism, because it can't be denied that throughout Roman Catholic history, in spite of some of the strange traditions and strange customs and strange venerations, there have been different monastic orders. There have been different deep thinkers which affect theology and even affected some of the theology of the early reformers. And then another book, and this is probably my favorite of all of them. This is from Church History 1, History of the World Christian Movement, Volume 1 by Dale T. Irvin and Scott W. Sundquist. And I have referred to these resources in a number of our ministry publications, like Torah in the Balance, the Messianic Sabbath Helper, and they have been rather useful. So these would be excellent additions to your home and most especially your congregational library. Now, there is a History of the World Christian Movement, Volume 2, which came later. It came after my seminary days. But those are things which I think you will find useful, because there are a lot of people who talk about church history. They make a lot of assumptions about this or that, and it's important that you at least read texts like these at least once through in your religious experience. Because as I said, I certainly am not Roman Catholic. My family has a deep Protestant background. In fact, my paternal grandmother, when she married my grandfather, she was excommunicated because she was Roman Catholic and she married a Protestant. So that's always clouded our family's approach to Roman Catholicism. We've never had a positive view of it, but yet we still have to recognize, as many Protestants would, and as many of the early reformers would, that we're affected by Roman Catholic thought in some form or fashion at some point on some issue. And so that means that we have to deal with something. We may have to deal with an issue on a case-by-case basis, just like in our Messianic experience, we got to deal with, we're affected by centuries of Jewish thought, and you have to evaluate matters on an issue-by-issue basis. Now, many people in the Messianic movement have a deep-seated hostility toward the religious system of Catholicism, and that is to be expected. Yet, should this negativity be something which is passed on to, listen to me very carefully, one's Roman Catholic neighbors? And these are the people you interact with every day. There is, of course, a Roman Catholic religious system, but then there are people. Catholicism's activity in history has got a lot to answer for. There's no question about that. Catholicism as a religious system is going to have to stand before the King of Kings and answer for a lot of its severe mistakes committed in history. Catholicism largely used religion, especially through the Middle Ages, to control the masses of Europe. And things, of course, got so bad by the 15th and 16th centuries, somebody in Catholicism recognized we're going to have to fix a lot of these problems, hence the Protestant Reformation. And one of the main things that the Protestant Reformation saw enacted was people being given a basic education so they could read the Bible on their own. We don't need priests. We don't need the papacy. We don't need any of that to tell us what to believe about the Bible. God has given his people brains, reason, intellect, his Holy Spirit. We should be able to read the Holy Scriptures on our own and have his Spirit direct us to what the Word communicates. Now, throughout a great deal of Roman Catholic religious history, Catholicism has maintained some overly conservative theological positions, at least officially, but has seen an increasing number of progressive clergy, most recently Pope Francis and a number of his appointments as cardinals. So a lot of people, when a pope dies, a new pope is elected, especially if they hold to premillennial eschatology. They have a negative disposition toward Catholicism. They associate even the office of the papacy with the false prophet of Revelation. Is it time for Catholicism to end per Revelation 17 and 18? The burning of Mystery Babylon, which sits on 7 mountains? Or is it simply time to see more and more people question Catholicism? Where's all this Mary veneration coming from? Where's this in the Holy Scriptures? Where's this? Where's that? They have a relationship with the Bible, but they also have a deep relationship with tradition that goes way off the map. More pragmatically, what might come out of the new papacy of Leo XIV? Now, there are many people in the Messianic movement who have intersection points with Catholicism in some way. What might some of these be? There have been Messianic Jewish believers who were called Christ killers by their Roman Catholic neighbors. Admittedly, some of that may have been when they were teenagers, and teenagers don't know a lot about God, the Bible, and life, but that can still hurt, and that can still be a wound which is open in the hearts and minds of many Messianic Jewish believers. In my case, as occurred with my father's mother, we had family who were excommunicated for marrying a Protestant. And that is not something you see isolated either. There might be a story in your family or from someone you know, Roman Catholic, married a Protestant, got excommunicated, and were effectively considered dead by their extended family. And of course, there are other people who they witness Roman Catholicism because they've got Roman Catholic neighbors. They may have to go to a function or two at a Catholic church, a wedding, a funeral, something like that. And they see all these rituals and they're like, what is this? And they frequently consider it along the lines of being pagan light at best or full out idolatry at worst, especially as it involves Mary veneration. And all the statues and everything else. And what do you do about the second commandment and no graven images. Where does all this stuff come from? And it's no wonder why the Protestant reformers wanted a much more toned down, simple faith. Still, as we sort through some of this, and this is where we have to be fair as individual believers, we have to act in a mature way. There are sincere people in Roman Catholicism. They, in their minds at least, they love God, they love Jesus, they go to church, they're actually striving to be ethical and moral people. They oppose abortion, they oppose LGBTQ. They are people who are your neighbors. They live across the street. You know who they are in the marketplace. They're part of your homeowners association. They pick up your mail when you're out of town. They water your plants. They are people who you actually might like. And what about these people? Not some of the clergy and some of the weird stuff that they're involved with, but the people who you share experiences with, who mean something to you, your neighbor. Now, in their final days, whether what they're doing right now or not doing right now, whether it honors God or doesn't honor God, are those going to be people who, when they are facing the reality of the end of their earthly life, will they make their peace with God? Not through last rites delivered by a priest, but they'll get before the God of creation, not in a confessional booth, but they will go right before the God of creation. They'll recognize that the mediator they need is not the different saints. It's not the Virgin Mary, but it's rather Jesus, Yeshua. Will they be able to make their peace with God, and will they make it into the kingdom? Ultimately, only God knows. And that's the case with people who are Protestant as well. They go through different, well, I go to church and I read my Bible and I pray, but have they really dealt with their sin? And so if they're sincere and they know when they reach their final days, hey, I got to get some unfinished business taken care of with my Creator, yeah, they can make it in too. And various Jewish people who, they go to temple, they go to synagogue, they observe Shabbat, they're kosher, they do the festivals, they do all these outward things, but they still know there's some rupture between them and their Creator. If they cry out to the Lord in their final days, will He reveal Yeshua as Messiah to them? That's what we need to be praying for when we think about Roman Catholicism, because a lot of us are going to be talking about Roman Catholicism over the next couple of weeks as more and more comes out about this new Pope, and we see all these new changes taking place. So, in my mind, we all have Roman Catholic neighbors. I grew up in the greater Cincinnati, northern Kentucky area, which is a huge German Catholic population. Not that it was irregular to be Protestant either, but that meant that, aside from the little story in my extended family from my grandmother, yeah, we had Roman Catholic neighbors, and we also knew people, especially when I went to Christian school, their family was Protestant, but many people in their extended family were not. The father or the mother left Catholicism and became Protestant, but many people in their extended families were still Roman Catholic. And even though, I come from a North American, Protestant tradition, I think North America still on the whole is rather more Protestant than it is Catholic. There are going to be a lot of questions regarding Catholicism raised by this new papacy, as they're going to try to get people to cross over. And yet here we are in a Messianic movement. We want people, if they're genuinely called, to be aligned with matters of Israel and the Jewish people and God's end time plan. So I doubt this will be the last time we talk about Roman Catholicism. we'll probably have to talk about, well, what do we do about Protestantism as well, and how does that intersect with the Messianic experience and some of the challenges which can come from that. But it's important that we remember this with the changes taking place. All right, so our news roundup. And we do the news roundup after the theology roundup because a number of these things are time sensitive. And we know that people talk and new things occur. And our objective is to stay up to date with conversations taking place. Some of these are things your local congregation or assembly might talk about. Some of these things your local congregation or assembly might try to stay away from. So we try to stay up to date with what's happening. And these are a lot of stories which cross my social media feed passively. All right, our first story, and this is from yesterday, May the 12th, Charisma, whether you like charisma or not. The title of this article is The 21st Rung of UFO Disclosure. Are we finally ready for the truth? Look, religious people are definitely talking about extraterrestrials, UFOs. Are they fallen angels, Nephilim, demons? Here, this article referencing L.A. Marzulli, who has written a lot on this topic. I can't say I've read that book, but makes light of Bob Lazar. Any of you all have gotten into the alien UFO phenomena, you're going to encounter the name Bob Lazar. Other people wanting to know, what is this about? What is this not about? Marzulli cautions that while the UFO revelations may seem exciting, they're part of a larger coming great deception. He suggests that the ultimate aim of this disclosure may be a form of global manipulation framed as salvation, with extraterrestrials positioning themselves as humanity's creators. Okay, so where did humanity come from? Were we created by an eternal God, or were we seeded by extraterrestrials and then left to evolve on our own? I mean, even Star Trek has picked that theme up. If you remember the episode of The Next Generation called The Chase, there was a race of beings eons ago, and they seeded all of the worlds of our galaxy, and basically the episode ended with humans and Klingons and Romulans and Cardassians and everybody else being related to each other, and they couldn't handle it. So expect some of those discussions to take place. All right, our next story, yesterday from BRICS News. President Trump says the United States stopped a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Now, we are relieved, of course, that that conflict has seemingly ended. Yes, India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons. There's also a number of discussions taking place right now that the Pakistan Air Force performed superbly, marvelously against the Indian Air Force, which is a big deal because the Pakistan Air Force is armed with Chinese fighters, and Indian Air Force has Russian and French-made fighters. So what does that say? Okay. Next story, and this has got a lot of people upset and disappointed in President Trump. This is from the Epoch Times, although it's circulated in a number of other news outlets. President Donald Trump on May the 11th said the United States is receiving a plane from Qatar that will be used as the new Air Force One. So a lot of discussions about, can he receive a gift from Qatar? Is it the U.S. Air Force which is receiving this gift? Where's the new Air Force One, which the order was placed a while ago? Why hasn't Boeing performed? Is this a form of bribery from Qatar? I mean, all these different questions. And yeah, we just continue to monitor it. And I can't say I'm totally happy with this myself either, but I'm also equally displeased in some of these defense contractors who can't seem to get off their butt and get the new Air Force One off the assembly line. Okay, from open source intel yesterday, Netanyahu, within days, things are going to happen in Gaza. Things will happen that you have not known until now. All right? We will see what happens in the next few days then. Next story. This is from the X channel Pope Respecter, who says, I know I am guilty of this too, but we really need to use religious terms, e.g. orthodoxy, piety, etc., rather than the conservative liberal political terms. But I do believe Pope Leo is very orthodox and very pious. Because it's now being circulated, is Pope Leo XIV a secret conservative? You know, a lot of people are expecting him to be Francis II. But is he going to be Francis II, or is he going to be a throwback and be more of a kind of John Paul III? We'll wait and see. From the X channel, Rapid Response 47. So this is what President Trump says about the aircraft. We're very disappointed that it's taking Boeing so long to build a new Air Force One. We have an Air Force One that is 40 years old. If we can get a 747 as a contribution to our Defense Department to use during a couple of years while they're building the other ones, I think that was a very nice gesture. Of course, let's say the Defense Department gets this aircraft from the Qatari government. They can't just start flying it immediately. They've got to get it outfitted to their particular specifications, what the president needs, etc. More than anything else, this is just an embarrassment to Boeing and some of the other defense contractors. That's really what this is. And that makes me feel bad as an American. All right, from Instagram, the New York Post yesterday. Have you seen this? This flying ring in a Kansas town. The skies above a small Kansas town became the stage for an astonishing and unusual spectacle as a large black ring seemed to defy explanation. Okay, so is this real? Is it fake? These are the kinds of things which get people to ask questions about, are we alone in the universe? Or at the very least, what does our government, what do other governments have in their top secret arsenal, which are going to get us all afraid or shaken up? From the Instagram channel Explaining the Universe, some of you all probably are aware of this. In late 2024, Jaron Campanella, a prominent flat earth advocate and YouTuber, participated in an expedition to Antarctica called The Final Experiment, organized by Colorado pastor Will Duffy. The trip aimed to test flat earth claims by observing the midnight sun, a phenomenon where the sun remains visible for 24 hours during the Antarctic summer. Campanella, who previously denied the existence of the 24-hour sun, witnessed the phenomenon firsthand. In a live stream from Antarctica, he admitted, "Sometimes you were wrong in life. I thought there was no 24-hour sun. In fact, I was pretty sure of it. The sun does, in fact, circle in the south." So this was a flat earther who had to renounce his claims of a flat earth. And indeed, this is something which affects a lot of people. It has affected some people within the Messianic sphere of influence. My own sister Maggie told me that at their Messianic congregation, they had to do a Shabbat teaching on the shape of the earth. They affirm a spherical earth. I affirm a spherical earth. But why people embrace flat earth is because they cannot easily have a discussion regarding early Genesis and all the different perspectives which have come from interpreting early Genesis. Those who come from a very hard shell, inflexible, young earth creation perspective will easily embrace flat earth. Now, there are plenty of people who hold to a young earth creation model. So 6 24-hour days around 6,000 years ago who are not flat Earth. Answers in Genesis is not flat Earth. But people who hold to an inflexible young Earth creation perspective tend to embrace flat Earth. And one of the main reasons they do so is because they have been taught that evolution is so evil, it's so demonic, it's so satanic that a flat Earth is a kind of contained terrarium will immediately disprove evolution. And they often have no ability to, and I don't believe in evolution, but let's face it, the Jewish community largely does believe it. A lot of people I went to college and seminary with who would identify as evangelical, they believed in theistic evolution. Many people have no idea how to engage with those people and why they have come to the conclusions they've come to. And if they did, then we'd probably see a lot of moderation on this. Won't be the last time we discuss flat Earth. Okay, this is yesterday from Newsmax. Of course, we know President Trump is on his Middle East tour right now. President Trump said he was thinking about flying to Turkey for possible peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, but the Kremlin was silent about whether Vladimir Putin would attend. Indeed, while we know that there is a planned peace summit between President Zelensky of Ukraine, President Putin of Russia, we know this could all fall through. I hope it doesn't, but we know it could all fall through. Okay, 3 more stories. This is from Open Source Intel. Yesterday, Prime Minister's office, Netanyahu spoke with Trump and thanked him for his help in securing Idan Alexander's release. The American president reaffirmed his commitment to Israel and his desire to continue close cooperation with the Prime Minister. Netanyahu made clear that negotiations will only take place under fire. Okay, we're going to have more to say about Israeli-U.S. relations in a moment. This is from EWTN Vatican. EWTN is the Roman Catholic, or one of the main Roman Catholic broadcasting agencies. This article, Pope Leo XIV vows to strengthen relations with Jewish people. And so this is where a lot of people are concluding that Pope Leo could be a pope more along the lines of John Paul II, not necessarily Pope Francis, who was definitely more inclined toward Palestine, Hamas, etc. But we have to wait and see. From Open Source Intel earlier this morning, May the 13th, Netanyahu, addressing IDF reservists, said Israel will soon launch a full-force operation to crush Hamas. We're going in with everything to dismantle them. They may offer to release more hostages. We'll take them and then proceed. We're going all the way. On the question of Gaza's population, he added, there's a problem. Countries must be willing to take them in. If given the chance, half of Gaza's population would leave. He concluded firmly, Hamas will no longer exist in Gaza. So how much of this is he going to be able to accomplish? How much of this will be prevented because of other world factors? And that leads us to our final story. And this was picked up by End Time Headlines. Trump's Middle East trip sidelines Israel amid shifting U.S. priorities. Notably absent from the itinerary was Israel, a decision that has sparked debate and concern among Israeli officials and analysts. Now, I don't believe that the United States of America is getting ready to throw Israel off to the side. However, Trump is a president who is America first. He wants to see the American economy revitalized. With that, he needs to go to places like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to secure investment in different U.S. industries. And America first doesn't mean Israel is being dismissed, but it does mean that America's interests are going to have to be taken into consideration. Israel's interests have to align with America, not America aligning with Israel. But of course, there are a lot of people out there in the Messianic community. Oh, Trump is going to betray Israel. Trump is going to do this. Trump's going to do that. And yeah, we don't know what's going to come from this fully. And if you're right, let's say Trump is going to see U.S.-Israeli relations diminish. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's say for the purpose of argument that he does. You're part of the end time move of God. Are you ready? Or are you going to complain like the Exodus generation? And I think what we're going to start seeing is, yes, we need to be paying attention to what's happening in the world. We need to be paying attention to this and that. But a lot of people in the Messianic community who, I'm part of the end time move of God, it's just a label. It's just part of marketing, part of packaging. They don't really believe it. And they're acting more like the Exodus generation, which perished, than the conquest generation, which was ready for God's plan to move to the next phase. And so, we'll continue to see what happens. We'll continue to monitor what happens. I want to see peace in the Middle East. I want to see an economic bonanza involving Israel, its Arab neighbors, the United States, all of our partners and allies. Trump is first and foremost a businessman, which means he does things differently than people who are politicians. But we wait and see. And it's important that we always monitor things. So we have a lot to be praying about. We have a lot to be interceding for before the Lord. The Messianic journey never ends because, we believe that it is something which is going to culminate with the return of Yeshua, because he is the only answer for all of the world's problems. As always, my friends, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.